Everyone, we'll convene our special meeting here, and I'm going to turn it over to Caltrain right away because we are starting a little late. Please tell us who's here, Casey.
Great. My name is Casey Fromson. I'm the Director of Government and Community Affairs.
And I'm Sebastian Petty. I'm the Director of Policy Development with Caltrain.
And we're here today to present an update on the Caltrain business plan. We've been working on this for over a year and working with cities up and down the corridor. We always ask feedback for the cities if they want an individual briefing, and so that's why we're here today. We're coming up to a key milestone in the project, and we want to make sure that we have time to get feedback from the whole council, and that's why we're here to give a presentation and update of where we are with this process.
Okay. And with that, I'll go through just a brief overview of the plan process and then talk a little bit about specifically how this plan sort of manifests within the city of San Mateo. Okay. So we're calling it the Caltrain Business Plan. It will ultimately, at the end of the process, result in something that looks like a traditional business plan for a railroad, but really to get there, we're doing more of sort of a long-range comprehensive plan for the Caltrain service and the rail corridor. So this is a big picture plan. It's taking a really long-range look at the railroad and the services we run. It is a major planning effort, so we are looking at the future of the service and thinking about how kind of the number of trains and how those trains are stopping could change. We're looking at pairing that up with a business case that really puts together sort of the equation around why you might make one choice or another. So looking at the cost to Caltrain, looking at the benefits to the public that we provide or the environment, and really trying to kind of weigh costs and benefits around different choices. We're very focused on the community interface. So we run through a lot of different cities up and down the Caltrain corridor, and railroads have very real impacts, particularly when they change. And so that's, as we're thinking about our long-term future, it's clear that we need to think about how we manage that relationship and improve it. And then finally, we're looking at our own organization and thinking about how our organization may need to change as we plan for the future.
Do you have a microphone so we can hear you?
So,
You should project a little. This is being picked up by recorder.
yeah, I'll try to talk a bit louder for now.
There's a seat here if you can't hear.
Okay, let's see if this does anything different. But within the process that we've been going for a while, it's really a two-part process. The first part is about developing a big picture vision for the Caltrain corridor. So looking out to 2040 and kind of, again, developing sort of a vision of what the railroad will be when it grows up. We're coming up on a milestone in that we're going to ask our board to adopt a long-range vision for the corridor later this summer or early in the fall. And so that's one of the reasons we're here making this presentation now. Once they adopt that vision, then we'll develop sort of a detailed implementation plan that looks at what Caltrain could focus on over the next 10 years. And that vision really is a vision for growth. I think as some folks here may know, we're in the process of electrifying the corridor, and so there's already kind of growth planned and some major transformation to the system plan. Further out, we're committed to sharing the corridor with the California high-speed rail system whenever that system is up and running. And so that we know that there's a lot of growth on the horizon. The question is really exactly how is it going to manifest, how are we going to use these new systems, and how far should that growth go? The other reason we're really focused on this question is just the sheer amount of growth, land use growth that's happening up and down the Caltrain corridor between Gilroy and San Francisco. And so the graph on the right shows in the lighter blue that's existing population and jobs within a half mile of Caltrain stations. The darker blue are the latest regional Plan Bay Area projections showing what's projected to be added in that same geography by 2040. And so we're talking about nearly a 40% increase in the density of people around our station. So really a lot of demand. We see our trains are getting pretty full today already. And so this is one of the reasons we're really asking the question of just how much should we grow in the future. At the start of this effort, we ran some unconstrained projections, so we kind of wanted to ask the question if there were BART-like levels of service running in the Caltrain corridor, what would that achieve? And really what the projections show is if we had BART-like levels of service, we'd be carrying BART-like levels of ridership. So we looked at sort of a hypothetical, really huge increase in the number of trains running in the corridor and what we generated was over 200,000 people taking the railroad per day. And again, that's very comparable to what BART does in the inner East Bay or outer parts of San Francisco on a per mile basis. And so based on all of that, what we've been spending a lot of our time doing is coming up with some different scenarios that look at different options for how the railroad could grow in the long term. And so we've started by building on our existing plans and commitments. And so really foundational to those are the idea that we're going to share the existing corridor with high-speed rail. So we're not going to rip everything out and build 4 tracks everywhere. We're going to continue to serve stations. So we want to have a vision where we can grow incrementally. And then we've taken that and said, well, within that framework, what would it look like if we just kind of did the baseline and sort of finished up electrification and that was it, versus what would it look like if we tried to grow the system a little bit more. I won't dwell on these in detail, and I'll swing back to talk about what they might specifically mean in the city of San Mateo, but we've done this work at a pretty high level of detail, and so really doing detailed service planning around what would it look like if we meet our commitments to electrify and blend the corridor with high-speed rail, but maybe don't grow any more than that. So that would be at most 10 trains per hour per direction in the peak hour. Today, Caltrain runs 5. With electrification, we will add 1 more train, and then we're committed to providing slots for 4 high-speed rail trains in the future. So the baseline is 10. From there, we looked at what it would mean if we wanted to run some more Caltrain service, and so we developed a moderate growth scenario that looks at running basically an express train every 15 minutes in the peak and a local train every 15 minutes in the peak. To do that, we will have to add some infrastructure to the corridor, and so we'd need to put in limited 4-track segments. One of them would be in San Mateo between Hillsdale and Hayward Park. And so that would be required to enable that level of service. We'd also need to put a 4-track station in Redwood City. Millbrae would need to be 4 tracks to accommodate high-speed rail's use of that station. And we'd also need to put 4 tracks in somewhere in northern Santa Clara County.
Is 4-track the same as maintenance yard?
No, 4 tracks would not be the same as a maintenance yard track. We aren't able to achieve a perfect 15-minute local service at all the stations with this. And that was the trade-off, to have more limited overtake segments. And I'll talk a little bit about that because there are some stations in San Mateo that would get half-hourly service, and I'll explain the reason why. Finally, we looked at an option.
Can I ask you a question? Do you already have the right-of-way for 4?
We believe that in this segment that we do. This is the area next to where the grade separation is being built, and so it's been an area that's been contemplated
that's right.
for overtakes for some time.
Can you go back to the 30 minutes?
Yes.
What station is that?
So what we're illustrating, and a little later I'll really focus in on this. So you can see kind of on the yellow bar in that diagram in the middle of the corridor there, a number of the circles show half moons rather than the full white circle. So those are the stations where, or some combination of those, again, these are sort of illustrative frameworks, they're not absolute, would need to go down to 30-minute service. And the reason we would do that in this scenario is to make the local trains go faster so that there are fewer times they need to be passed by other trains. That combination of factors allows us to add more service to the corridor with only very short 4-track segments. If I switch over to this version, which is the high growth scenario, where we're really at this point maxing out the what can be accomplished on the existing corridor, this is really kind of pushing the limits. So in this case, we need to build pretty extensive overtake segments, about 15 miles total on the corridor of 4-track segments, a major one north of Millbrae, a major one in the middle of the corridor. So in this case, we'd need to 4-track all the way from Hayward Park south to Redwood City, so a long segment. And then another major one in Santa Clara County. That provides the flexibility and the infrastructure to have a true 15-minute local service. And so in that scenario, all of the San Mateo stations would be getting a full 15-minute service. The trade-off there is there's a lot more infrastructure required to provide that level of service on the corridor. So again, none of these are recommendations. It's just showing with added infrastructure, there are benefits that come with that, but obviously some pretty significant challenges. So it's
No.
really trying to map out what the spectrum of possibilities is.
The infrastructure would be the grade separations, would that happen?
It would be, well, there would be grade separations, and I'll touch on those in a minute, but it's
Okay.
also, it's building out additional tracks.
Okay, go ahead.
So we did run detailed ridership projections on all of these different scenarios, and between improved service and the just underlying land use growth that's projected in the corridor, we are looking at carrying between 160,000 riders a day and over nearly 210,000 by the time we're out in 2040. That's compared to about 65,000 that we carry on a typical weekday to day. We're very excited about that amount of growth, but it will be a challenge in some of these cases. In some cases, that's more riders than we're going to be able to carry. So in the baseline scenario, for example, we're projecting there's that level of demand. Whether they're all going to fit on 6 trains is a little bit more open to question. It would be a pretty tight fit. And so when we're using these numbers for business planning, we've actually constrained them a little bit so that we're not being overly optimistic about folks tolerating really crowded trains. Just putting those numbers in a different context, if we look at kind of our peak hour, our peak of the peak, today Caltrain carries about just under 4,000 people through the corridor during 1 hour in the peak of the peak, and that's equivalent to about it's about 4 lanes of freeway traffic, and so it's actually about 4,000 in each direction. So about, or 4,000 in one direction, a little less than that in the other direction. So in total, we're looking at about 4 lanes, highway lanes equivalent of people that Caltrain carries in 1 hour today. When we look at those ridership projections and think about what that could mean during the peak in the future, we're showing that we would add anywhere between another 4 lanes of highway capacity to 8.5 lanes of highway capacity in the future during that peak of the peak. So these are very big investments. They're very big changes, but the sort of the regional travel capacity that we're putting in is potentially very significant. So as I mentioned, towards the end of the summer and into the fall, we'll be asking our board to select one of these options as kind of the long-range service vision for Caltrain. And I'll emphasize again, these are illustrative frameworks. They're not one project. It's really a path of growth that we're asking the board to advise us on. And so whatever they adopt as a vision will be cast at a little bit higher level. It won't be adopting the exact service plan for 30 years from now. But to help them make that decision, and what we're doing right now is putting together a full business case for each of these options, so really making sure that we're fully accounting for all of the costs, talking about the potential impacts and benefits of them, and trying to put together a full picture so that the board and the stakeholders and cities really understand what choice is being made. In parallel with a lot of this work, and as part of a lot of this work, one of the other areas we've been focusing is on this idea of the interface between the railroad and the communities that surround us. So Caltrain operates in 21 different local jurisdictions in the 3 counties we work through. We're also a corridor that's about 150 years old, which means that sometimes we've got other uses very close to the corridor. We're not a greenfield corridor by any stretch. And so we know that with that, there are a lot of good things we think we do for communities, like providing economic development opportunities and mobility, but there are also clearly a lot of very real challenges with being next to an active railroad, and particularly an active railroad that's constructing projects or changing services. One of the biggest ones of those in the Caltrain corridor, they're all important, but one of the biggest ones is what happens at grade crossings. And so on the corridor that Caltrain owns, so we own our corridor between San Francisco and San Jose. We operate on UP's corridor south of San Jose. We have 42 at-grade crossings. There are 28 on the corridor that UP owns south of San Jose. These are where they are is kind of an accident of historical geography. A number of them, I think something like 70 of them, have been separated at some point during the life of the corridor. We recently rebuilt some ones in the city of San Mateo that had been separated a long time ago and were kind of at the point where they needed to be rebuilt. So it's a issue that the corridor struggled with for a long time, but it's a really huge one. Just to kind of calibrate it, we have about 400,000 cars that cross our at-grade crossings every day. So it's the combined traffic volume of the Bay Bridge and the San Mateo bridges. So a real big deal, and a uniquely San Mateo County problem as well. That just the distribution of these happens to be that 30 of the 42 are in San Mateo County. And so in doing this kind of big picture plan and talking about things like 16 trains per hour per direction, wrestling with the issue of grade separations and at-grade crossings is pretty unavoidable. And so what we've wanted to do at this scale is to really try to capture the magnitude of the financial challenge involved, so that when we're going through and kind of weighing costs and benefits, we're making sure that we're fairly reflecting some of the costs. To do that, we've really started with city plans that are underway, and so cities all up and down the corridor are implementing or planning for grade separations, and we're seeing a lot of activity at Caltrain. That's a map on the right there that sort of illustrates all of the projects and plans that are in some kind of pretty formalized process where the city council's involved, consultants have been engaged. So we started there, and then we did kind of a generic corridor-wide scan and added on sort of additional crossing investments that we thought would be necessary to either fully separate the corridor or largely separate the corridor and support the kind of infrastructure we think is going to be important. And we ran the numbers a lot of different ways, but inescapably you get to a cost that's between $8.5 and $11 billion corridor-wide. So a really huge investment. As we're moving forward, that's an investment that'll be carried into the business plan financials. So as we're weighing costs and benefits, we'll be talking about the cost of grade separations. I think at Caltrain also feel like this is a big enough topic that we really need to dedicate further resources and really focus study at a corridor-wide level to thinking about how we as a railroad can work with communities to advance these projects, help them stay coordinated, and probably most importantly, help them find funding. That we're at a point where there's so many cities now that are interested in pursuing these, that sources of funding we've been relying on are not going to cover it. We're definitely in the area where we're going to have to talk about new funding sources and figure out ways to really work together as a corridor to get these projects done. So I wanted to now briefly just focus on San Mateo. I've been kind of showing all sorts of system-wide information, so wanted to just again break some of this down to a city level. So in San Mateo, in the corridor that runs through the city of San Mateo, in terms of conceptual overtakes or four-track segments, there would be none required in the baseline scenario. In the moderate scenario, we would require construction of several four-track segments throughout the corridor, including one four-track segment between Hayward Park and Hillsdale. Again, that's sort of along the area where the grade separation is being constructed now. In the high scenario, that same four-track segment would be in place, but it would need to extend further south, really all the way down to Redwood City. So a really serious piece of infrastructure. For ridership and service levels at stations, so we've got today the existing ridership. These are counts from 2017. So this is San Mateo Station, the downtown station. So there are about 70 trains that stop at that station today. Peak hour stops per direction vary a little bit. About one in the off-peak, it's roughly about 2,000 riders are using or boarding that station today. In the baseline scenario, there's a lot of service concentrated at that station and pretty high ridership. In the moderate growth scenario, we're actually providing less service to downtown San Mateo, and some of that service is being reallocated to other stations. So the ridership actually dips a little bit there, and that's again the product of trying to make all the trains fit on the corridor. There is flexibility in that, so it's not an absolute, and there would be an ability to have a conversation around kind of which trains stop where within the city of San Mateo. So that's something that is flexible within these service plans. And then at the high growth, again, we're really increasing the amount of service there, number of trains stopping per hour and ridership. At Hayward Park, there you've got, again, you can sort of see the growth in weekday train stops and the corresponding growth in ridership projections. Again, in the moderate, we're actually stopping more trains at Hayward Park. That's largely due to the fact that at that point, Hayward Park would be in a 4-track segment, so there's a lot more operational flexibility to stop trains there. And again, you can kind of see how the ridership grows. And then Hillsdale has, within our sort of planning framework, we've continued to assume that Hillsdale sort of remains as kind of the regional catchment station. It's one of our stations that gets a higher level of service today, and that's largely what we've assumed in the future in all of these service scenarios. So you can see it's definitely a higher number of stops and considerably higher ridership. We did also do some calculations of potential gate downtimes. I would frame this again as very much a problem statement. We're, as I mentioned, carrying the costs associated with a lot of grade separations, and so these numbers really, I think, help articulate the reasons why grade separations are important. These are pure gate downtime, so it's not the time you would wait in traffic. It's just literally how long the gate is down and then when it comes back up. So you can see existing minutes out of a peak hour that gates are down today, and then how those start to progress as you talk about running more and more trains on the corridor. So we're looking at gate down times of between 15 and 8 minutes today, getting as high as over 30 minutes in the high growth scenario. So clearly a lot of traffic impacts there, and speaks to the reason why grade separations are part of this. So next steps, as I mentioned, we're really going through a lot of economic and costing analysis right now, and all of that's going to inform what we take to our board later this summer. Right now we're tracking to, it says July here, we actually pushed it back a little bit because we've got a number of board members who are absent in July, so we'll be really presenting the full set of materials to our board in August, and doing outreach both before and after that. And then sometime in the fall timeframe, we'd be asking our board to make a decision about which service vision should be kind of the long-range vision for the Caltrain system.
I'll just talk briefly over the last couple slides here to remind folks, where you can stay in touch on the project and where we have been. I mentioned with elected officials, the local policymaker group. Councilmember Rodriguez participates for the city, and we meet monthly really to give updates on the business plan there. We have the staff equivalent, and Brad and some of the staff here are following this. And then we have a variety of other places where people can be getting updates on the project, and we'll continue to have this level of kind of outreach at different layers, plus more as we go forward, from public meetings, the website, to these specific other meetings. We also have a website. It's caltrain2040.org. All of our presentations are on the website, so it's a great resource to look back at kind of some of the evolution and kind of do a deeper dive. We also have city-specific booklets that we've created. So we pulled everything from those booklets for the presentation related to San Mateo here, but it's a one-stop shop if you really want to focus in on a particular city to kind of walk through the evolution too. And we'll continue to update those as we go forward in the process, because we understand how important it is to have all the communities along the corridor understand what we're contemplating with this effort and give us feedback. And so that's another reason why we're here tonight as well. But everyone should know that resource, caltrain2040.org, is a great place to go. And then just by the numbers, we really have been making the rounds to a lot of different places as part of the update just through April, and we have much more to go.
Okay. Well, I would submit that you could get rid of a large chunk of the 30 at grade crossings right here in San Mateo as you go right through downtown. I know you didn't know that, but I thought I'd tell you. I know we have a lot of speaker slips. We have a lot of questions from council. I don't want to, not given, I think, I would like to hear the public comment as well. I'm glad you're in concurrence. Okay, so we have how many?
Right now I have 6 turned in speakers.
6, 7. 7, we got about 14 minutes, so let's do about 2 minutes a person for right now, and then we'll come back. I know we have a couple comments perhaps from council too about the set-out track and all those issues, but let's take it away, public comment. Okay. Now what we do is, just so you know, we need you to come over here, is that right, Madam Clerk? so that we can hear you on the video. It does not amplify you within the room, but the folks at home that are watching will be able to hear you.
Can you get that?
So as you speak, if you could come forward to this makeshift microphone for the video.
And you'll have a chair at the end. You can sit first, Kevin
Excellent.
Earl.
All right, super. Come right up.
Madam Mayor, they're not required to use the whole 2 minutes.
Not required. You always remind me of that. Not required to use all 2 minutes, but you may have 2
Okay.
minutes. We'll probably start our regular session, just so you folks know, just a few minutes late.
I'd like to remind you that this is Caltrain's 2040 plan. That means we're talking 21 years out. At the moment, 52 trains a day, weekday, per Caltrain schedule, pass through the Hayward Park station without stopping. By federal regulation, that means they have to be blowing their horn. 8 blocks away is what will soon be the first non-grade separated rail crossing in north of Redwood City. When you cross through a non-grade separated crossing, they also have to be blowing their horns. That's 8 blocks of horn blowing. It also means we have the lowest level of Caltrain service, fewer stops at Hayward Park Station than all 2 other stations have the same low number of stops as we do of any station north of the city limits of San Jose. Caltrain is talking now about adding a maintenance yard to Hayward Park. So what they're saying, and they want to do that a lot sooner than 2040. So what they're saying is that for roughly 20 years, they want to give us the lowest level of service of any station in north of San Jose, and probably the highest level of noise. Because I'm telling you, those trains, when they go through Hayward Park, they blow their horn pretty much the whole way, and that's both directions. And as someone who's lived in that neighborhood for almost 20 years now, lives in a 95-year-old home, this is the oldest development in San Mateo. I mean, there are lots of other old homes that are not are not modern soundproof. This is going to change the neighborhood, and this is going to be a loading area too. So they're going to be bringing trucks all day through neighborhoods and near parks. Look at the Hayward Square Park. I know there are other people who want to address this, so I will step off. But there's certainly much more, and I hope you will look into it.
Thank you, sir.
Laura Flooded?
Then who do we have after that? We'll try to get people up on queue.
The person after that is Liv Earl.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm Lawrence Flodine. I live on corner 10th Avenue and South Beach Street in San Mateo. Been there since 1961. And the house is was built in 1912. And I've seen all this trains go by, even since the steam engines. And all the diesel smoke and rust coming off the trains. And now with you, Caltrain, adding a maintenance yard in the back, you have promised a drain to control it. There has been a drain there since you put out a fence. And in that, probably about last 15 years, Caltrain has not cleaned that drain and sewer drain as of yet. Also, you plan to put in 4 tracks between Hayward Park and Hillsdale. At the last meeting, we were told there is not enough room to put in a spare or service track in that area. So how can you put in 2 more tracks from what you have? And there is, we're going to say, no room. This was, I believe, Mr. Bolin, who did who did this presentation. And the current plan that I saw him present is bigger than the one that you removed. So I don't know This is a future expansion of either more maintenance facilities that is coming down here, and it's only starting. There's going to be a lot more train tracks going to be going. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next is Liv.
Hi, Liv Pearl,
Followed by-
14th Avenue. It was explained to us last week in a meeting by Mr. Bolin that the secret report related to the rail yard was essentially an addendum to the 25th grade separation project. When the room was surveyed to a person, not one person in that room had had an opportunity to see that report and provide feedback, although Caltrain reported that there was no negative feedback reported. We asked Caltrain to commit to doing a secret report related to this actual project. They say they would look into it, but have not committed. This is an industrial location located in a residential area. There are safety issues, there are health issues, there are kids riding bikes. It will be of significant impact. And if any of you who were there at that meeting, there was a lot of heat in the room around the concern for this. So Caltrain pledges to be a good partner. We've yet to see true evidence of that related to this project. So I apologize for interrupting you earlier. I hope we can work forward to find a new location for this. Thank you.
So next is Drew.
In the interest of time, I have a lot of passion, but I'll skip my
Okay,
time.
then Jordan.
Thank you, Drew.
Hi, Jordan Grimes, 19th Avenue Park. So I'm really excited about this business plan. I take Caltrain probably 4 days a week, maybe once or twice a month on the weekends. So I'm very excited about this, especially the moderate plan, which has a ton of trains coming to Hayward Park. The idea that I could get a train every 15 minutes is really, really exciting. Obviously, there's a lot of potential challenges with all the grade separations we'll need to do. But the plan itself is really ambitious and really exciting, especially given I don't think there's anyone in this room who would argue that the strategies we've used the past, 30 years to combat traffic aren't working. The idea that we could potentially create a second 101 via train service is really exciting. I also just wanted to say that as someone who I sort of disagree with the comments about the train noise. I've lived in 19th Avenue Park my entire life in a, not a 90-year-old home, but in a 65, 70-year-old Eichler, which are not particularly forgiving when it comes to noise, and it hasn't really been an issue. So yeah, thank you for coming, presenting, and very exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Next is Dina Levine, followed by Evelyn Stivers.
Dina Levin with Friends of Caltrain, and this is a nonprofit organization supporting successful modernization of Caltrain and stable funding and sustainable transportation, with participants up and down the corridor from San Francisco through San Jose, including here in San Mateo. And I'm really excited to see this plan that, as the previous speaker mentioned, has the potential to take a whole nother 101's worth of traffic growth over the next 20 years off the highway and onto trains. And trains off the highway also means, or cars off the highway also means people not driving to and from the highway. And so that means less car traffic on local roads. So as part of the business plan, we are strongly supportive of having Caltrain have that frequent service and capacity, be well integrated into other rail and bus and other transit to help create a usable system, be equitable and affordable for a wider share of the population, including what you may hear about shortly in terms of having land use proposals, land use plans along the lines of other transit agencies in terms of supporting affordable housing along with the transit-oriented development that will be considered as part of the business plan. With regard to the grade separations that are needed, there could be a potential beneficial relationship with some passing tracks that may be needed because this infrastructure is useful not only to our local city, but to the region and the state, as we might have trains coming, over the Dumbarton corridor and right and left, and trains coming up from Monterey, and that would have value to the state. And so there might be funding that would be available to help with the local projects that can also help with that traffic relief and that better local service. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Evelyn Stivers. I'm with Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County. And I'm also very excited about this new plan. I think Caltrain is used to us bugging them to change their policies, but I'm here tonight to implore the City Council to think about this huge investment that the region and the state is making in upgrading our train system and supporting it with the land uses that'll provide the ridership that'll make the train financially viable long-term. We're in the process of updating our general plan. This is the perfect opportunity to look at the Hillsdale Station, to look at Hayward Park, and to see how are we going to support 20 years from now what the train will be. Not what it is today, but what it will be. So thank you so much for all your hard work on the general plan, and thank you, Caltrain, for the great presentation.
Any more?
No.
Okay. Look at that. Okay, we'll bring it back to council for comments. I have a few. Anybody else? Go.
Yeah, I want to say I'm very excited, happy to see the plan through 2040 with great opportunities, I think, for cities to take advantage of. As you know, we're going through our general plan update right now. I look forward to Caltrain being kind of a partner and working through this as we try and figure out how we're going to shape certain areas in our city, and hopefully to take advantage of and be a good partner to Caltrain in providing riders for this improved ridership opportunity. Also, as a resident of Hayward Park, I want to say I am really concerned about the proposed set-aside track there. Like the rest of my neighbors, I would really like to see that re-examined very closely. Thank you.
I'm also very excited about this plan. I think that you guys have a very difficult job in that you have so many municipalities along the way, and I think that the key, as a representative on San Mateo City Council, the key for me is to make sure that you're partnering with the city, and we have a seat at the table and decisions are not made in a vacuum. Like, for example, I was personally very concerned about the low amount of stops in our downtown in the moderate growth plan. I mean, downtown is our downtown. And also, too, I'd echo Councilmember Bonilla's call to take a closer look at the location of the maintenance track and spur track, or maintenance yard and spur track, and particularly, I agree with the residents' call that adequate notice was not made for the CEQA study, and that at the very least, if it looks like it's going to be there, I'd like to see that CEQA study open again. Also, too, I would like to get a little, we don't have time now, but I was going to ask, and I'd like to get a little bit more information in the future about the decision to move the temporary station where Hillsdale is being moved to Belmont instead of Hayward Park, because there's a lot of concerns around the Bay Meadows community that they rely on that. They rely on walking, they don't have cars, and just like we were trying to envision that area, and now they're wondering how they're going to get to Belmont when it would be a lot easier to get to Hayward Park. And that's another example of a working with the city to kind of maybe ask our opinions, maybe ask residents what they might want to do instead of just making the decision and telling us what it is. That's it. Thanks.
You have to be careful what you wish for. I think it was 8 short years ago that we were in the depth of the recession and trying to get our way out of it and hoping that the economy would stay afloat. And now we're busting at the seams with jobs and traffic, and we know that, and the area feels denser than it has ever been. I feel like there's lots of people who walk around and they want to see changes in San Mateo. Many people want to see it change back to what it was 20 years ago. I don't see that happening. Many people want to speed it up and get to where we will be 20 years from now, and that scares a lot of us who are residents today. And I think the short answer is we're trying to do everything we can to mitigate the impacts that we see. Traffic can only be addressed if we are able to get people out of their cars, which means they're going to have to live closer to the train and get on the train. Maybe you're not going to be one of those people that's going to live close to the train and get on the train, but there's a whole bunch of people who are driving 3 hours right now who would be more than willing to sign up for that. And if they're not driving from 3 hours away, that's cars off the road for 3 hours a day in each direction. So we see that has to be part of the solution. Which means that we have to build these grade separations, which $11 billion is not in any of our pockets right now. I think all of us agree, if we can, we're committed to finding you another place to put the yard, and not Hayward Park. Hayward Park is not the right location if we can find another site for it. So we're going to do everything we can to find you that other site that works for Caltrain, because we want to support the train, but we're here for our residents first.
Okay. Concerned about moderate growth, not having enough stops downtown. Very concerned about putting something that's so industrial right near a neighborhood. I don't think we can tolerate that. So I think we need to reopen the CEQA. I think we have to analyze moving it. If we can't move it, do you really need it? Where is the other set out and how close is it? Caltrain just may have to go without one, maybe stretch it a little farther, is my thinking. If it has to have it, then we will need to talk about mitigation big time. With respect to the grade separations, $11 billion doesn't seem like that much. I've said all along, there are companies in this area that are making record profits, but infrastructure is not keeping up with getting their folks to work every day. And I think the private sector ought to be looked to see if they can help fund some of this tax-free. The time has come for us to not have our tax dollars go to DC and then we beg to get them back. So I'd like to see if we can't get creative on that funding part of it. Because when I look and I see upwards of a half hour during peak times to shut down our east-west corridors, I find it quite alarming. That's my one concern. Obviously, getting people out of their cars is great. And if we can meet your 2040 goals and do it in a way that works for all 20 cities up and down the corridor, let's do it. Thank you for being here. We look forward to more dialogue. Councilmember Prescott wasn't able to make it, but one of the things that she asked of our council is perhaps we should think about preparing a letter to Caltrain about the set-out track and take a position about our concerns there. So we may meet and get something in writing to you because we're all very concerned. It's a tough thing to put near residents, so let's see what we can do. With that, I thank all of you for being here, for being concise, and we're only 7 minutes late to start our other meeting. So thank you very much.